So we have some absolutely game-changing SSR Animus coming into the game, and not only just SSR Animus, but SR Animus and new shells. So we're jumping into everything. We're going to be starting out with Ramoka. What she's bringing to the table in her skill 1, she does 260% damage to a single enemy with a 40% chance to inflict 2 turns of speed down on them. She also has a unique ability called Sweetheart in this skill 1, which will reduce all her Animus skill cooldowns by 1 turn after each kill. So that's already kind of insane for skill 1, to be honest. But hey, I ain't make it. Now we go to the skill 2. We also have 280% damage to all enemies that can be dealt. For every 1% HP the target has lost, the final damage is increased by 0.6%. And after attacking, Ramoka will recover 70% of her lost HP. Going into the skill 3, Ramoka will first deal 3 hits of 180% damage to a single target, and then with the first hit having a 75% chance to inflict a stun to that target. Okay, so just to kind of break that segment, the first portion of this is to a single target enemy, and it's going to allow you to be able to stun them, right? Now, after attacking, she deals splash damage to all enemies equal to 33% of the total damage she dealt. And if the first 3 hits kills the target, then the splash damage ratio will be increased to 100%. Now, the reason why this is so insane is because this is basically meaning that if you kill a target, the damage that will happen in the AoE portion of the ability is basically enough to just about kill the remaining target. So it's a great wave clearing ability. It just needs or requires you to actually kill that first target, right? So it's really, really insane. I'm gonna show you guys this stuff as well. I'm just gonna go through all the character kits, and then I'll have some timestamps so that you guys can skip ahead if you wanna see them, in action, right? Now, of course, with that, moving on, we have Tsukiyomi. So Tsukiyomi is a very interesting unit as well herself. She's a more defensive based unit, but still does some damage because her damage technically scales off of that, right? So she's able to deal damage to a single enemy equal to 320% of her own defense, and it increases the highest attack ally's turn meter by 25%. So she's kind of like fulfilling like almost like that paladin role, kind of like that, assisting that one character, but that's all in her skill 1, right? Now you have also in the skill 2, where she's basically able to deal damage equal to 320% of her defense to all enemies. She has a 45% chance to inflict a turn of silence on them, and this attack also reduces all skill cooldowns for all allies for 1 turn. So a silence already is pretty strong because that's forcing the opponents to only be able to utilize their skill 1s, and then she's also able to reduce all the skill cooldowns for her allies, which is just going to help you with rotating your abilities. I feel like this is going to be really good, especially in things like PvP, but this can work in PvE, right? Like very, very good ability. Now you also have the golden hour. Now this is going to be her buff that she's able to give, which she's basically able to increase the target ally, so one person that she picks or you pick, 100% of their turn meter she's basically able to boost. Then she will boost her own turn meter by 35%, and then she grants the entire party an attack up buff and a speed up buff for 2 turns. So that right there is going to be kind of insane when you're talking about like some of the pairings that you can basically put her with, because you have like obviously some of even the free units like Gray, who does like the crit damage buff, and then you could pair her up with him, for example, where you're able to basically get the attack up buff and then the speed buff, which is just going to help you with rotating, right? So there's just kind of things like that that you're able to take advantage of. Now getting into Freya's kit, we kind of talked about this because of the fact that there's already videos and stuff circulating on her, but just to recap on what she does, Freya basically is able to do 2 instances of 130% damage to a single enemy with a 60% chance on the first hit to grant a random ally Dream Weave. Now Dream Weave is basically when inflicted with a debuff, it consumes 1 stack to purify it, stacking up to 3 times, and then this will last for 2 turns. Now, and you also have a chance at 30% on the second hit to apply Nightmare, which is the other portion of this ability, which makes it to where the opponents take 15% more damage when attacked, and then heals the attacker by 15% of the damage that they deal, right? Now, the Dream Inducer is going to be her unique ability that she has within her skill 1, which increases a teammate's turn meter by 4% each time they receive a buff, and knock back the enemies by 4% every time they basically receive a debuff, and this does not consider their resistance. So this ignores their resistance, which is insane. Now, you're also going to be able to trigger a maximum of 3 times per turn, and Freya gains double the Dream Inducer effects when receiving buffs and applying debuffs, which means inherently she's going to be able to rotate the fastest, and just being able to get the most out of her skills, which is kind of an interesting, you know, scope for a unit that's doing some sort of debuffing or debuffing buffing, that she's actually getting the most benefit from it as the person applying it, which is kind of insane. Now, you also have in the skill 2 defense up that she can apply with the Dreamweave to all allies, and an 80% chance to apply an additional stack of Dreamweave. Now, keep in mind that this is also going to be in conjunction to the skill 3 that she's also going to have that allows you to apply an attack up to all your allies, and then she deals 4 hits of 65% damage to all enemies, and each hit has a 30% chance to inflict a 2-turn of nightmare on them. Now, this is like this is a lot. So you're getting all this damage amp, you're getting all of you know, these debuffs on the opponents, and this is really going to coincide heavily with units that are kind of built on the sets like Momentum, for example, that basically scale off of the opponents having a ton of debuffs, right? So there's a lot of value that she's actually going to get, and this actually makes her quite useful in quite a bit of the game. So really insane unit. Now, we also have Rosa here, okay? Now, Rosa is actually a pretty interesting unit as well, because she's actually bringing some of that crit to the table. Now, when we look at the skill 1, Rosa deals 3 hits of 70% damage to a single enemy, and if the final hit is a crit hit, it has a 50% chance to reduce the target's turn meter by 10%. Now, she has a passive here that is going to have a unique debuff called Bladeheart Bloom, okay? So each time Rosa lands a crit hit, if the target is not afflicted with Bladeheart Bloom, she inflicts 1 turn of Bladeheart Bloom on the target. Now, Bladeheart Bloom will make it to where they take 15% extra damage from basic attacks, and when the carrier takes a crit hit from or as the main target, Rosa deals a follow-up attack to them with her basic attack. This effect can only be triggered 1 time per turn. So it's basically almost kind of guaranteeing like she's gonna be trying to enforce the fact that you're gonna be taking 15% more damage from basic attacks, right? Now, you also have in the skill 3 where she's basically able to apply 2 turns of crit rate up to all allies. Then she deals 3 hits of 120% damage to all enemies, with crit hits having a 40% chance to inflict 2 turns of speed down on them. Now, I know like a lot of the times, like people that aren't that savvy in these types of games will see things like speed down and it's like, oh, that's whatever. Like, no, speed down is actually a very important debuff because that literally makes it to where your opponent cannot rotate the turn meter as quickly as you can. So if you're getting a speed up buff, like the things you can kind of pair her up with, I can see her working with like a Heinrich or a Lily, you know, units that are able to take advantage of either debuffs, debuff more, or can give the supplemented thing that she needs. Like for example, the crit damage. That's the like one thing she would need, and she probably is going to be going crazy with that, right? So that's just kind of like, you know, things I think about when I look at some of these characters. Now, of course, you also have Mia, okay? Now Mia's actually our support character, one of the new like kind of healers coming into the game. So she deals 240% damage to a single enemy and applying a 2-turn of shield equal to 10% of her max HP to the ally with the lowest HP. Now, Rainbow Blessing is her unique ability in her skill 1. For every one buff carried by allied animuses, Mia gains 5% damage reduction, stacking up to 8 times. So that's already kind of crazy. So she's going to be super tanky. You're going to have in the skill 2 the ability to deal 2 segments of 140% damage to all enemies, and each segment has a 50% chance to dispel 1 buff from the target and a 75% chance to knock back the target's turn meter by 15%. And then of course she comes with a skill 3 that's going to allow her to heal all her allies, restoring health equal to 20% of her max HP. And that's always huge because that means that if you're building HP, then your entire party gets value, and then she of course gets the bulk from that. She's able to reduce all ally skill cooldowns by 1 turn, extend all buffs by 1 turn, and shorten all debuffs by 1 turn, excluding control effects. So With that being the case, it's actually going to be making her a astronomical support in the game. There's no one exactly like her. We obviously have Ling Lao, but Ling Lao actually like does some purifications and some other things as well. But she's going to have some of that extra value with that damage reduct, and of course with I would definitely say with some of the shielding capability that she also is bringing to the table. Now, last but not least for the SSRs, we have Born. Okay, now Born might be my favorite so far out of all the characters that I've been able to like kind of play test and just kind of theory crafting with. He actually is coming with a skill 1 that deals 300% damage to a single enemy, recovering HP equal to 60% of the damage that he deals. He has a passive, and this is where things get kind of crazy because it makes it to where at the start of battle, Born increases his max HP by 500% of his attack. Okay, and so with each attack, it also deals additional damage equal to 30% of his max HP. And Born cannot land critical hits. Now, a lot of people might say, well, not being able to land crits sounds bad. Well, no, this is actually allowing him to actually ramp much higher in some regards, I would argue, against multiple enemies. And this all comes together in the skill 3, where you basically have it to where if there are 4 enemies alive, it basically will deal 440% damage to all enemies with 100% chance to dispel 1 buff from the target. For every 1 enemy unit reduce, it deals 1 additional segments of 100% damage. This attack ignores the target's passive skills. So this is making him one of the only units in the game that is, I think, one of 2, but actually just does it, I would say, in a more proper manner, where he's able to actually ignore passives. Now, the thing that's really insane about this ability is that it is an AoE nuke bomb, right? But it gets better, and the ability will evolve into segments as you start to reduce in enemies on the field, which means you're basically getting more hits, but they're still really high damage oriented hits. So that, in conjunction to the fact that he can dispel buffs, makes him great for buff stripping. This is going to be a really good counter unit when it comes down to being able to nuke, and then also being able to remove some of those like more tedious buffs that some units might have. So yeah, those are basically all of the new SSR Animus that are coming into the game. So let's actually jump over to the new SRs real quick. So now with the SR Animus, we have a new version of Ren actually coming into the game, Ren the Unbowed. So what Ren is actually going to be doing here in the skill 1, and excuse the translations, I think they gotta fix this, but she's gonna be able to deal 3 hits of 80% damage to a single enemy, and if the target's speed is lower than hers, it will increase the final damage by 50%. Already kind of screaming like a damage build, right? Now when we go into the skill 2, which by the way, I just like the name of this skill, which is called Let Me Solo. That sounds like it's gonna do crazy stuff, right? So it basically makes it to where Ren the Unbowed deals 260% damage to a single enemy, and for every 1 speed she has, increases the final damage by 0.35% with a 70% chance to inflict a 2-turn speed down, right? Now with the very last skill, and this is what is kind of like a really nice, like I would say pairing, because it kind of like works in like a double dip sort of way, and I'll kind of explain that in a second. But with the skill 3, Ren is basically going to be able to grant herself a 2-turn speed up buff, and then deals 2 hits of 150% damage to all enemies, and for every 1 speed she has, her final damage will be increased by 0.3%. So what makes her fairly unique is, we don't have a ton of units. I don't think that she might be one of maybe 2, if not the only one, that actually scales off of speed. Now the thing is how this double dips is it's scaling the speed of the unit, but it's also decreasing the speed of the opponent. So you're getting more damage and you're moving faster. So that's where you kind of get the double dip. So that's kind of insane when you think about like some of the neat things that you'll be able to do with that. So yeah, Ren the Unbowed is definitely really cool comparatively to her other form, which is a little bit more taunt oriented, like defense tank down, right? So now we have a new character, a new light unit coming into the game called Marvel. Now Marvel is actually doing something a little bit interesting, because what he's bringing to the table, he can deal 240% damage to a single enemy with a 50% chance of stealing 25% turn meter from the target. Now going into the skill 2, you're able to deal 330% damage to the main target and a random enemy with a 50% chance of inflicting silence for 1 turn. Okay, and then of course with the skill 3, you have the ability of dealing 280% damage to to all enemies with 100% chance to inflict a 2-turn speed down and a res down with, which by the way, this is the only unit in the game that has this. There's no SSR that has this. There's like literally no other SR that has this ability to reduce resistance. So this also is going to be paired up with a 60% chance to decrease the turn or the target's turn meter by 50%. So this is actually a really insane ability, just simply because one, you're reducing how fast they can go on, around the turn meter. You're lowering their resistances, which is inherently going to make it to where you can land more of your debuffs. And this is actually going to even help with even units that are attribute disadvantage against something, to where they're able to have more of a chance to land their, given ability, right? And then you have the turn meter pushback of 50%. So that's kind of busted because it is only it's a one of a kind, right? Like there isn't any other unit in the game that can specifically do this ability or this debuff, which is the decrease effect res, which is the 40% is kind of insane anyway, because I'm almost going to argue, unless like somebody intentionally builds effect res, most people probably wouldn't build it. But hey, that's that. So that's going to be that for the SSR and the SR Animus. Let's go and actually shift over to the new shells that are in the game. All right, fam. So here we are. We are at the new shells. So we have a couple of them here, or a few here. So starting out with Jackal Guard. Jackal Guard's ability is actually going to be after the main body's turn, which is basically the character that you have. Whenever you hear the term main body, it's referring to the character that it's equipped to, right? So after the main body's turn, a follow-up attack on the main target will happen, dealing 240% plus 4,200 damage. And this will then apply a speed up buff for 3 turns to the main Animus and increase their turn meter by 25%. So we have a lower version or lower rarity version of something like this, Black Flag, which kind of like does damage, but then also gives you a speed up buff. This is like an evolved version of it where you then are able to get a turn meter push of 25%. So this is actually going to be really nice. 3 turns that it basically requires for it to cool down. So this is actually going to help a ton with like rotations. I could even see that like working really well on like Rende Unbowed, for example, on turns where her speed up buff might rotate off. You'll be able to just kind of keep it on constant if you wanted to. So it just kind of all depends at that point. We have Revelation, which is another one, a damage boost, shell coming into the game. So before the owner takes action, it enables each crit hit dealt by the owner Animus in this turn to deal additional real damage equal to 12% of the target's max HP. Total damage dealt per hit cannot exceed 180% of self attack. Now, I will say that this is going to be doing 2 things in the game, and this is a fact. It is going to be, for one, real damage is just true damage. If you're not familiar with the the wording there, but it's just true damage, and this is based off of a target's max HP. This is easily going to be one of the best shells in PvE, period, for damage dealers. Anytime you're dealing with high scaling HP values, these types of sets are going to do really well. Now, the other place this is going to do really well against, or the other thing it's going to do really well against, are enemies that are built really bulky. So built with a ton of HP, it's going to allow you to be able to, especially when you pair this up with things like ignore defense, and now you're doing true damage and all that stuff, you're going to be able to shred still. And that's going to help out those types of units because the meta did shift more to the tank down. So I think that that's definitely a nice addition to the game. That could definitely help out a ton when it comes down to those more damage oriented, DPS, super squishy type units, right? Now we also have Amber as well. Amber is when the owner Animus is about to die, it halves their current turn meter, removes all the effects on them, and recovers 60% of their max HP, and puts them into a 1 turn of ice state. Now, this might not sound like much, but this is basically a death prevention pet. The one of a kind, the very first one that we have in the game. Ice State basically makes it to when and while it is active, it increases the defense by 200% of the person that is applied to, and it grants immunity to turn meter reductions or turn meter pushback, buffs, and debuffs. And when the Animus takes their turn to act, it removes the ice effect, and then they will recover 50% of their max HP. So it's allowing them to actually get back into the fight. And this is going to be really insane when you're thinking about the openness of how any character can basically equip equip any Animus, any shell. So that's going to allow you to be able to make any kind of composition combo where if like a character you kind of are banking on them like maybe dying or they do die, you can give them a death prevention pet if you really want to, right? So this is going to be great for both PvE and for PvP. Now, when we're looking at the very last one with it, which is Fortissimo, this is going to be for each time the owner Animus heals, it stores 35% of the healing and 70% of the excess healing before the owner takes action. If any ally's HP percentage is below 60%, it heals all eligible allies equally using all stored healing. This is something I was actually talking to the homie Scion Storm about this, so shout out to him, by the way. Make sure you guys check out his channel. But this is actually going to be an insane Animus, and specifically for those more tank down oriented type units and supports in general, even if it is just PvE, because what this is basically going to be helping the game out with is auto, right? So one thing we can't actually control in the game is like your units using a certain ability first. So like if you're playing with like Ling Lao is going to heal first, right? But what this type of pet will do is it will store the healing that she did, 70% of it, that nobody actually received because it was just the first ability she used, just because that was her skill 3, right? And it was her turn. And then when their HP percentage hits that below 60, it will then share that to your party. And so that's actually a really like insane combo when you're talking about like you have damage reduction pets, Lighthouse, for example. You have the Bloodbath set, which can further reduce damage. And then now you have something like this that's going to be able to redistribute and basically store and just kind of house excess healing to use it at a more opportune time when you actually need it. So it is insane what some of these new shells are going to be bringing in terms of value to the game. But nonetheless, these are all of the brand new shells that are going to be happening. So let's go ahead and let's actually shift into some gameplay. So first up, we're going to actually show off Born and Ramoka. Keep in mind, guys, this isn't really intended to necessarily show or talk about the strategy of this composition. It's just to kind of showcase what these units, kind of are able to do, and how their animations and stuff like that kind of look. So we're gonna go ahead and jump right into it. Let's start this battle up. I'm gonna keep it on ×2 up until the point of me getting to their turn, so you guys can actually see the full extent of their animations. So let's go ahead and let's rotate this real quick. All right, let's see. All right, so we're gonna go with the boy Oval here. All right, so now we got Ramoka, okay? So Ramoka's a really cool looking character. See, I even moved my body so that you guys could see her, all right? But when you actually, of course, swap skills, so this is what she looks like in her skill 1. Going into her skill 2, that's her stance. And then, of course, going into her skill 3, that's her stance, right? And then you kind of see like there's like this like little kind of glow effect that she actually ends up getting. So it's a pretty cool. Now, of course, with that, let's actually go and we're gonna start out with the skill 3 because that's actually her bread and butter here. So let's actually slow this down a little bit. So you see it hits that one target, it's stunned, and then it AoEs, right? So that's where you basically get that kind of like spread from. So that's how much damage she did. Now, mind you, this is with like the team kind of being a little janky. I normally would apply like a defense break so she can scale that a little bit more. But that's perfectly okay because we got the boy Born next, all right? So in his initial stance, he only is gonna have 2 stance animations because he only has 2 skills and then his passive. So he basically summons 2 Dobermans, bro. Like, this is like one of the coolest characters to me personally. Freaking Flame Dobermans is so sick, right? So that's basically what he looks like in his initial stance. And then going into a skill 3, he just kind of has some shift and he's like getting ready to kind of like cook real quick. So let's actually start out with his skill 3 here, so you guys can see that. Oh man, that's sick. And look at the look at the cleave. Like, so the thing is he can't crit. So when he does that AoE, that's just all raw damage, just all raw damage. So he's insane, right? So like it is absolutely nuts how he works, right? So let's actually see if we can get a CC here. Let's actually speed this up. Oh, full team. That actually works. All right, so let's actually rotate them. And I'll just kind of show you guys what the single target animation looks like. We'll go for this. All right, There we go. All right, so actually we're gonna show off Ramoka's skill 2. So her skill 2 actually, like I mentioned before, it's an AoE. And with this ability, it's gonna be able to restore HP, but she doesn't have anything to restore right now because we haven't gotten touched, so you won't see that, but just know it does it. So let's actually do this real quick. Boom, and look at the damage. Like, okay, guys, and I want to emphasize, this is in-game. This is like in-game, guys, all right? Now, of course, with the skill 1, we're basically able to lifesteal, and we basically deal 300% damage. So 300% damage in a skill 1 is pretty insane. So anybody he basically hits here is like good as dead, especially in the CC state. I think like we typically would throw damage at the boss here because that's the hardest thing to kill. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. But even then, he still gets a good chunk of damage off, right? So now we're just good to auto this, and we'll just kind of get to maybe Ramoka's turn. I don't know if it's gonna let me again, so we can show her skill 1. Okay, there we go. All right, boom. So we'll do that, and then Ramoka just has her single target ability in the skill 1, which boom. GG, right? So that's basically Ramoka and Born in a nutshell. I mean, again, really insane in terms of how they work. But again, this is just one of the given scenarios that you would actually be able to apply them. So let's actually move on to some of the other characters. All right, so to give you guys a triple decker here, we're going to be getting into Mia, Rosa, and Tsukiyomi here. All right, so let's go ahead and let's start this. This is the EXP like final dungeon that you can farm. We're gonna go ahead and speed this up just a little bit, just so we can get past Chiaki's turn, and then we're gonna look at their animations. Now this of course is Mia. This is her skill 1, her stance for that. When you go into her skill 2, which is the dispel, you kind of see how she kind of moves her little spirit wisps to her hand, and then you go into the skill 3, which is just a little bit of a kind of like outward pan, and you can see that it's actually like this like heaven glow, and she like literally grabs an umbrella. That's a really sick concept, I'm not gonna lie. But we're gonna actually start out with her skill 3, so you guys can see that. So it is an AoE heal, and really sick. And then boom, you see the reductions kick in. You see, and that was the reductions to cooldowns, and then obviously the heals and things of that nature. Now, of course, we have Rosa. So Rosa, this is her skill 1 stance that she basically has. Then going into her skill 3, she does this. She just kind of turns, and you kind of see, it kind of gives a little bit assassin-y vibes, kind of admiral vibes, because of how the coat is positioned on her and stuff like that. But we're gonna start out with her skill 3. Remember, this is also an AoE ability, so she's pretty sick. Like, look at that. Woo! The damage with the follow-up. So that's her passive kicking in, right? So she's sick too. Now, of course, we have Tsukiyomi here. This is Tsukiyomi's main stance. Going into her skill 2, you see that she kind of just opens up a little bit there. And then you have her skill 3, which gives her that outward pan. And that's something I've really been liking with what they've been doing, is it kind of gives like that spotlight, like, okay, that character is about to do something. So it clearly indicates that, and they have that whole aura. She's just really sick, kind of almost giving me like FGO vibes, right? So we're gonna start out with her skill 3 here, so you guys can see that animation. Boom. And that's so sick how even the After Effects smoke comes up. So she's pretty sick. So this is gonna be Rosa's skill 1. Boom. Pretty sick animation for her as well. All right, so we got Tsukiyomi here. I don't think we can actually rotate here. So this is why it was perfect to use a rotator. All right, there we go. So now we have Tsukiyomi with her skill 2. So you guys can see that. And look, she literally summons a person to come out and hit for her. It's so sick. All right, so we got the dispel here. So we're gonna do the skill 2 for Mia. And it's a big AoE water pulse, which is pretty cool. Now we don't have any more rotations, so we're just skill 1 this. and then everything else is just now rotating back, right? So again, it's really insane how these units work. Let me see if we actually, nope, that's it. All right, yeah, there we go. So yeah, that's basically Tsukiyomi, Mia, and Rosa. All really cool. So let's move on to the very last characters. All right, guys, so we got Marvel and Rin the Unbowed up. So let's go ahead and let's jump right into theirs. So let's look at this. So what we currently have right here, this is basically Rin in her skill 1. Skill 2, she just, you know, does a little bit of a swap stance there. And then when she goes into skill 3, I ain't gonna lie, the foot stance is kind of cooking, okay? So we'll start out with her skill 3 so you guys can see that animation. So she kind of goes into like this whole drunken fist type vibe. I think she's the only character in the game that has that. Now, of course, with Marvel, really cool, like sophisticated character. This is the skill 1 stance. In the skill 2, he kind of, you know, does that little nerd, like, you know, anime pro tag. I'm a press my glasses against my face. And then you have these skill 3 here that actually is, you know, showing him about to start cooking. So let's actually start out with his skill 3, which then of course has the speed down and that resistance down, which is pretty big. So that's pretty sick. Boom. Yeah, that's pretty sick. All right, so Chiaki, we're gonna have her rotate us one more time. All right, so now we have the skill 2 from Rin the Unbowed, which is just a giant kick. And then of course we have the silence coming from Marvel in his skill 2. And then boom. So it's kind of like a data drop, like nuke. That's kind of cool. Now with that, we also have, let's do the skill 1 so you guys can see that. So that's the skill 1, which the skill 1 had way more impact. That was pretty cool. So yeah, the skill 1 for Rin is actually pretty good. Let's actually just do this. We're just waiting to get the Marvel first. I'm not gonna kill anything. She's just way faster because remember, she has all that speed up buff. So you see how she just rotated him and they're in the same party. And then of course we have the skill 1 for him, which basically allows him to basically steal some of that turn meter from his opponent. So yeah, guys, that's basically all of the characters in action, okay? Now, of course, as far as shells, we were able to use some of the shells. I'm gonna have more in-depth content coming later to actually dive a little bit deeper into more of, you know, what the shells applications are going to be, whether it be PvE or PvP or both, right? So there is a lot to get into, man. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel, dude. Again, I'm gonna be trying to bring a lot of this stuff to you guys firsthand. We also have things going up on the wiki as well. So just to try to make sure that there's a lot of solidified information for you guys to start out as strong as possible. Make sure that you guys are tuned in, locked in. Make sure you check out the homie Scion Storm's channel as well. But guys, that's gonna be that, man. Hope you enjoyed. Everyone, stay blessed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.